Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and executive coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. I am so excited to welcome back to the show, Elise Loehnen. Elise is the New York Times bestselling author of On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good, and host of the podcast, Pulling the Thread, where she interviews cultural luminaries about the big questions of today. She is also the author of a new corresponding book to On Our Best Behavior, Choosing Wholeness Over Goodness, which we will be talking about today, written along with Coach Courtney Smith, and is the co-author of True and False Magic with legendary psychiatrist Phil Stutz. Also, Elise has co-written 14 books, including 5 New York Times bestsellers. And previously, she was the chief content officer of Goop and co-hosted the Goop podcast and the Goop Lab on Netflix. And she also led the brand's content strategy and programming. Finally, Elise lives in LA with her husband and 2 sons. Elise, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan. That is quite an introduction.
Yes, that's all you. So much cool stuff. Okay, we have so much to talk about that I've been looking forward to talking about. Now I'm going to take us back to our original conversation, which was a little over a year ago. And I want to catch up on the origin story of that conversation. So for everyone listening, the origin story was there was this phenomena that was happening that Elise, as a visionary and thought leader who's done so much, as I just read a bit of, had another new book, a best-selling book, and male podcast hosts, interviewers, radio, TV, nothing, no males were asking you onto the show. And so I read about that on your Substack, and I felt like, as someone who has an amazing wife, an amazing mother, an amazing mother-in-law, amazing sister-in-laws, and 2 daughters, and I was enraged, actually. I was like, this can't be. So I just wrote this email to you saying all of that in so many words and inviting you on the show. And you graciously said yes. And we had our conversation. So everyone who's listening, On Our Best Behavior, a previous episode. So what is the follow-up? Please tell me some males are inviting you onto their shows.
I mean, a few more. I've had a couple. A few more. I've maybe 5 or 6 more. Isn't that interesting? It's so interesting.
I like how you're using word interesting, and I'll use curious.
Curious.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, I think, and we puzzled, I feel like, through this before, but to me, I'm like, I don't want to believe that men are not interested in the psychology of women. And as much as my book is written for or about women, it's also very much about men. It's about sort of these archetypal qualities of femininity and masculinity, which are divorced from gender, even though in our culture we like to stitch them together and say this is a good woman is this feminine ideal only, and a good man or a powerful man, I would say, is this masculine ideal. But yeah, there's a general, and it's so interesting to watch the general culture of podcasts evolve and change and shift and grow because, as I've written about on my Substack too, I'm not alone. There is this strong bias / preference, particularly amongst big male podcasters, to really only feature male experts. And I think it speaks to the way that we tend to see men as authority figures and experts. Women see them that way too. These guys like Andrew Huberman talk about half of their listeners being women, and I don't think we're conscious of it. It's
Hmm.
not like you're like, I don't want to hear any women today. It's just like it must work in their stats.
Yeah, it must.
You know?
It must. I just don't resonate. So a few things
Yeah.
that I'm learning is clearly I'm not a big male podcaster, because I've had you on twice, and I'm guessing now of over 8 years of podcasts, I have to believe that 2/3 of our guests have been women. That's just my guess. We could
Yeah.
check that. And I guess I was also reflecting on this and thinking, God, in high school, the joke was high school and college with my friends. It was, uh, oh, Dan, he's in touch with his feminine side. And I was like, yes, I am. Like, I just
Yes,
started
you
to own
are.
it. I just started to own it. Like, yes, I am. I still use it today. So, all right.
And that will keep you alive.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like I'm working on my next book, and it's when it's men who are comfortable with their sort of dependence on other people
Hmm.
and who are in committed long-term relationships. They're the ones who ironically have longevity, not the,
Interesting.
biohackers. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, quick teaser then, if you can, whatever you can say. Like, is the big content of your next book, is it because we're going to talk about you are a cultural psychic, you are a cultural anthropologist, and you are good at, I want to move into the shadows
Yes.
momentarily. Um, what's the big picture of this book? Like, big topic?
The big topic, and I pitch it so badly, so I promise everyone who's listening, it's gonna be good, and it will be tidy, and it will make sense, but the big it is about shadow, and it's about binaries and polarities, and the Jungian idea of the tension of
Mm,
the opposites, and how do we integrate what are we pushing away, and how do we pull those parts of ourselves back? But I'm doing it through mostly a cultural framework. So looking
mhm,
at the shadow of cultural femininity and the shadow of cultural masculinity, and tracing big themes that I think are a lot easier to see for
mhm,
us
mhm,
than a personal shadow workbook, because we all have
mhm.
our own stuff in the hefty bags that we haul around behind us, you know?
I am really looking forward to that. This is so, I just kind of see where you're going and where you've been
Yeah.
going, and it's really cool.
I'm just
I
gonna solve
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
problems, Dan. It's no problem here, okay? We'll just
Well,
solve all the
as
problems.
we talked about before the show, um, you are very productive and you get a lot done. So, um, like, these are good things to solve. Like, let's use our time to solve these big problems and to offer our people some wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Some wisdom from growth. I Okay, so with shadow, we're just like moving right into this theme. So I want to tell you about a synchronicity,
Ooh,
which relates to the shadow and Richard Rohr. And interestingly, I hadn't even thought about it, but Carl Jung and talked a lot about synchronicities.
yes. This is one
Which
of his big themes. Yeah.
That is so cool. So I was finishing this Richard Rohr book. I finished it last night, but a week ago when I was starting to prepare for this conversation, I was reading about the shadow and the cultural shadow of U.S. society and the church, and I said, "Wow, okay, gosh, this is like right up Elise's alley. Like this totally fits." So that's number one. Then number two, I listened to your podcast on the modern middle-aged individual, and you were talking about Richard Rohr and the shadow right there. And I'm like, okay. And then yesterday I went on a run and I'm like, I'm going to go listen to the last conversation that Elise and I had. And you talked about a Richard Rohr book that you were reading, and you quoted it. And I think it was the exact same book that I just finished, the wisdom
The
pattern.
wisdom pattern. Oh my
Right?
God.
Yeah. So I'm
Best
like,
book ever.
all that just happened. So um this is so the shadow, like let's dive in a little bit about the shadow, because like the thing that you do and what people are telling you that you do is bringing the cultural shadow of femininity and beyond to light.
Yeah.
And the importance of the shadow, as we will talk about, is not to negate it or to deny it, but to actually bring it into the light, to own it and to accept it and integrate it for us to be
Yes.
fully whole. And that's not something that like is easy for us on an individual level or a collective level.
No. No. Our instinct is to eradicate and destroy and deny and try to sanitize that which we do not like or do not want, both about ourselves and about other people. Um, it's 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 an instinct as old as time. It's the scapegoat mechanism. It's all of it. It's like if they did not exist, then I would be safe. I would be okay. They are the contaminating influence, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's how we sort of create polarities and binaries and I am this and not that. I am good, they are bad. I am right, they are wrong, etc. And we do that within ourselves too. We take all these very human qualities and we label them as bad and undesirable and not confirming of our ego and identity. They don't fit and we consign them to the shadow and we go unconscious about these qualities, but they are part of us because we are human, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
we're carrying it's my therapist who's a Jungian talks about it as, your blind spot. Robert Bly, who's a poet, talks about the shadow as this trash bag that you
Mhm.
fill
Yep.
until you're 20 and then you spend the rest of your life trying to get these parts out of the bag and reintegrate it into yourself. And I think that it's such an important psychological insight to recognize that, there are ways to identify what's in your shadow, but it is inherently unconscious. You can't see it, but
Mhm.
other people can see it,
Mhm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it becomes visible when you are projecting those qualities that you refuse to own onto other people. You can only identify in other people things that you hate in yourself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, this is the most basic pedestrian example, but leave it to like a 9-year-old to be like, God, you're a hypocrite. But you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off and you're like flipping them off and
Mhm.
wigging out. And then, 4 minutes later, you're doing the exact same thing, justified and
Oh,
full
way
of your
different. It's
own
way
glory.
different. Way different.
Yeah, way
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
but it's that level of hypocrisy. Like you can identify how many of us have been with a friend and they're talking badly about someone and criticizing them for traits that they themselves
Right.
exemplify all the time, right? That's the
Totally.
shadow,
That's the
right?
shadow.
That's the
Eh
shadow.
yeah,
Yeah.
Richard Rohr, for those of you who read him, know that he's a brilliant person and, quotes a lot of scripture and the Bible, and the one that, he quoted towards the end of the wisdom pattern, which many people have heard of. I'm not gonna say it accurately, but basically, "Why are you focusing on the speck in your brother or sister's eye when there's a log in yours?"
Yes.
Right? It's like and then and the other thing I think of that you're saying is as we project onto others is one of the best ways for us to know what is our blind spot and what our shadow is when we someone is driving us nuts and there's
Yeah.
something about this person that just aggravates us, and usually that's a mirror back to us of a shadow part of ourself if we're getting triggered so much by this other person's behavior.
100%. It's our envy, unconscious envy. This person is getting away with something that we would never allow ourselves to do. They have something that we want that we can't even acknowledge or claim.
Hmm.
It's one of those projection and then recognizing, like, using that exactly what you described. This person is irritating me. Tormenting is a good word because they're really
Hmm.
teaching you something. They're your
Mhm.
mentor.
Mhm.
Um, is I think one of the swiftest ways to say, "Oh, this is my shadow in action. This is a
Mm.
part of me that what is calling me calling to come home." Um, and the thing that's I think so important to just say about the shadow and Carl Jung's work, and which is where I love writing books that sort of like fit in a psychological paradigm and fit in a religious spiritual paradigm, or more spiritual than religious,
Hmm.
and fit in a cultural paradigm. We're conditioned, all the conditioning around this is good and this is bad is pretty much almost exclusively cultural, aside from like, don't kill
Hmm.
someone else, right? Like
Hmm.
what we find in our culture to be good is different than what you're going to
Hmm.
find in a culture across the world, right? We all have our own mores, customs, and ideas.
Hmm.
It's going to be different in a different state. So, what's important to also relax into when you're thinking about your shadow is that a lot of the labeling about what's bad or what we reject as not being part of our ideal personality or ego is not, quote, is not truly bad.
Hmm.
And Carl Jung says that the gold is in the shadow. It's certainly the source of a tremendous amount of energy. I think on an alchemical level, this might be too out there, but when I think about sort of the evolution of humanity and consciousness, we grow, we evolve, and we expand, and we become more awake and more alive and bigger in some way through shadow, through hard things and suffering.
Right.
And when we're pushed to expand beyond where we're comfortable. You can, I think, expand through light, but I think that the mechanism for most of us is when we're
Hmm.
brought to our knees and are forced to move forward in a different way.
Yeah.
And in that same way, I think personally, like all the growth is in the shadow. It holds energy inherently. And then I also think that we spend a huge amount of our energy keeping that trash bag closed and repressing and suppressing what's in there and keeping it all away. Right. And
Totally.
so that's all energy, I think, to be reclaimed when you can relax and be like, yeah, I think I'm on the whole a kind and good person, but I can be a real shit sometimes. And I'm going to
Yeah.
allow that. It
Hmm.
happens. Right.
Totally. I couldn't agree
Not you,
more.
Phil. You alone.
Yeah,
You're never.
yeah. Not Phil. Not Phil. I success feel Phil just chimed in, everyone. He says not him. I personally, and in my work over the years, I could say with pretty much certainty, like, success feels really good, and when things work out, it feels really good, and it often can be on the other side of these struggles, these, trials and
Mm,
tribulations. But I agree, like, we don't it's like, success is almost an award. It feels good. It can increase our
yeah.
confidence, I would say, but when it comes to growth and expansion, it's only through the hard stuff, like, really through the hard stuff, which we are calling a lot of it is shadow. Like, so let's just break this down even more. Like, if something traumatic happens to us, that in and of itself is not shadow, right? That actually can then play into the shadow and play into the shadow parts of ourselves and how we tuck away that experience into who we are and repress and deny out of just coping. Um, but it's working through the tough stuff and the stuff usually that we never wanted and wish we didn't
Mhm.
have, where we grow, like, from the right from the dark and
Yes.
from the pain. It's where it's how we evolve.
Yes. Isn't it awful?
Yeah, it's yes, it is. It's awful and it's beautiful. I heard someone describing
Yeah.
earlier today, and it makes me, something you said earlier made me think of the quote from Zorba the Greek. I think it's like, ah, life, the full catastrophe. And it's
Yes.
like, that is, as all the existentialists write about, it's like, it's all of it. Like, you can't get out of being human without a lot of really hard, painful stuff. And this whole idea that we should always feel good and we should be happy and we should always have joy, it's like a setup for such a um, disillusioned life, um,
Yeah.
for us to
Well,
be programmed to think that.
yeah. And it goes to this idea that we can sort of choose one half and resist or deny the other. And I think it was Niels Bohr who had this quote about how, like, the greatest paradox is that with the deepest truth, the opposite is also true. And, Carl Jung would say, I think he has essentially a quote like, the more light, the more night. The greater the light, the longer the shadow. So I think what's also, and I don't know if you found this in your practice, Dan, but that the more the more you work you do and the more you grow and develop and mature and simultaneously maybe are having your own waking up experience as you are growing up, that the shadow material that you have to contend with gets more intense also.
Mhm.
And it's why I think we see, when you look out at the spectrum of theater, the kabuki theater that we're all that we're all watching every day in the news, you see these people who have great power and maybe a lot of light and just like a tremendous amount of shadow. These things go hand in hand.
Mhm.
And so I think it's like, I think also in our culture, we have this tendency to be like, I'll get over this, I'll transcend this, I'm gonna like do this work and then I'm done and then everything's resolved. Like, I'm gonna deal with my
Mhm.
shadow, right? Like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
integrate all of my shadow. And it's like, well, no, actually, actually, yes.
Mhm.
And your shadow is just gonna keep in pace growing with you too. You're never done. And it's why, too, you see, not to jump around, but when you go
Mhm.
into these communities, spiritual communities, for example, or you're with anyone of great or significant power, if they aren't attending to their shadow rigorously and regularly, like there's going to be a tremendous amount of harm to the community. You see it in every spiritual community. Look at the
Yes.
Catholic Church.
Right.
Look at someone like Bikram on almost every single leader
Yeah.
in these movements that, yes, it might be full of light or it might point would have been full of light or power is like, if they're not attending to their shadow, this is one of the reasons that Richard Rohr has become one of my favorite teachers because I went to visit him in Albuquerque and he has the Center for Action and Contemplation and he's a father. He lives in a like one-room cottage in a parking lot. He is just so close to the ground, and he
Mhm.
writes about or he talks about, like, praying for his daily humiliation,
Hmm.
and we need that level of humanity from people who profess to guide and lead us through these times, that they are also doing their work, right?
Yes. Totally. Totally. And this also makes me think of, I just listened to your conversation, with, Shannon Watts, which was awesome, and her new book.
Yeah.
And you were taught, so I just wanna like, go a little bit into how this conversation can help us understand where we are as a culture with our divides, because you also wrote about that recently in your Substack. So putting both of those things together, this idea of if we see everyone as human and everyone with their shadow and everyone who's also has their fear points and their pain points,
Mhm.
and they're all, even though this is really hard for many of us, how do we, literally, like what they say in politics and what people used to do more is reach across the aisle. Like, how do we reach across the aisle with our neighbors, with our community members, with our family members, and
Yeah.
realize that everyone has a reason for why they think what they think? And if we can lean into this realness, and I'll say, if you correct me if I'm wrong, like this is, if we can have the courage to embrace our own shadow and lean into other people's shadow in a way where you can meet them where they are, as opposed to try to just enlighten them and tell them where they're wrong. Like, we have so much more in common as humans than what gets
Mhm.
distilled in what's happening right now.
Yes. I mean, God, I don't know. I mean, I feel like all of my work, and you probably feel like all of your work too, is sort of pushing in this direction because it feels like we're shattering. We're at some sort of break point and something is going to emerge in its place. I think that we're sort of at the tip of breaking through to the next level of consciousness. I love this system called spiral dynamics, for example. But
Mm-hmm.
I think speaking of shadow, I think particularly for men, but also for women, I think one of the first things that goes in the trash bag is fear. I think that, and I think for men who are, I would say, are, programmed or acculturated for power and that they're going to provide and protect, and all of our cultural stories about what a strong man looks like, fear is not part of this picture, right? It's not part of the painting. And so I think fear is right into the trash bag. I also think fear is our most animating impulse. It's what keeps us alive, right? It motivates us to
Mm-hmm.
seek food and shelter and all of the things as humans, regardless of gender, that keep us on the upright on this planet. And we are drenched in fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 99% of people would not be able to even acknowledge that or accept that. Then I think that, and I think that that at least gives you a meeting ground to be like, where's the fear? What's the underlying fear here? It's always fear of safety, of insecurity at its core, but it's like fear of loss of control, fear of loss of approval. Those are also fears that we write about in Choosing Wholeness. Um, so there's that. And then I think that I had this moral psychologist and professor on the podcast, Kurt Gray,
Yep.
and I wish his book had been bigger, because I feel like it's so helpful. It's called Outraged, and he writes a lot about fear and, again, like, how we're just wired for it because
Mm-hmm.
in our prehistoric days, like 1 out of 10 people wouldn't survive the year because threats were so, I mean, it was
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And that you could say, well, then we shouldn't have any fear, but that there's concepts creep. And so the aperture just widens and we perceive more things as potential threats, absent like a giant 300-pound eagle swooping down and picking up your kid, which happened.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so there's that. So I think fear is like, it's ever present. We're never going to escape it. We have to learn how to be present with it and integrate it and recognize like it's in our shadow bags largely,
Totally.
and it's unconsciously driving our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then his framework is really powerful because there have been, like, Jonathan Haidt had his whole very complex, like, this is how liberals perceive harm, and this is the moral
Mm-hmm.
psychology of a liberal versus a conservative, and they have these factors and they have these factors. It wasn't accurate ultimately. And but there's some powerful stuff in there. But Kurt Gray's work is essentially like the next iteration of it, and it's much simpler. It's that there's a perception of harm on all sides, and people's idea of who is being harmed is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you understand who so you brought up Shannon Watts, for example. And so the story on one side of harm is my friend's child was murdered at school.
Mm-hmm.
And another person on the other side's perception of harm is, I had a home invader. How am I going to protect my family?
Right.
Um, but anyway, it just starts to get you into a place where you're actually not arguing about facts, but you're talking about stories, and
Mm-hmm.
those are more mutable and flexible. And we love story, and we can relate to other people's stories.
Understanding this part of humanity, this part of being human, and trying really hard. And I know I get pulled off all the time, but trying to get back on center of we're all humans doing this for the first time, at least in this iteration of our lives. And people are doing the best they can. and people have beliefs for a reason. And how do we find a way to connect? How do we find a way for compassion? How do we find a way? How do we find a way, right? Like find a way as opposed to bury stuff, anger, and to be fair, I mean, plenty of our most effective, peaceful leaders say there is a time for anger. It's like, how do we use the anger? How do we use the anger for good while acknowledging that even though we have our own points of view and we have our strong feelings, we have our own shadow bag too, right? I think that like we all have a shadow bag, and it's, as you said, as your therapist said, it's a blind spot. Our shadow is our blind spot, and the work, whether you're doing it with a therapist, a coach, yourself, a religious leader, is to try to unpack these aspects of ourselves so we can more fully integrate ourselves and be more fully aware with less blind spots as we go through this life.
Yeah. No, and I think that, like you mentioned anger, and it's using our anger skillfully. I think we can't use any of these energies, let's call them, or traits that we repress and put in our shadow bags. We cannot use them skillfully at all when they are unconscious. And when they
Mhm,
are in our trash bag, it is unconscious. And
mhm.
so, but to be like, I don't have any anger, then you are literally what's her face from Harry Potter who wears the fuzzy pink cardigans and murders children, like
Yes,
Dolores
yes,
Umbridge.
yes.
Like, um, there is that part, like it by in repression, I think it becomes supercharged.
Mhm,
And the way
mhm.
that it's then unleashed is far from skillful. So, yes, like anger has to come out of the bag and be integrated and deployed skillfully, not at a person, not blaming, not shaming, but as a way to articulate boundaries, needs, what you stand for in the world. It is above the line anger, which is a distinction that we make in choosing
You
wholeness,
do. Right.
is clear. There's a clarity to
Mhm.
it. Uh,
Yes.
and whereas below the line anger is terrifying and damaging and destroys relationships when you're blaming and you're shaming and you're identifying the villain and I'm the victim and you're the villain, or I'm the
Right.
hero,
The
whatever
drama
role you're taking.
triangle. The
The
drama
drama
triangle.
triangle,
Yes.
my
Yes.
favorite thing ever.
Yes. All right. We're moving towards that in the workbook because you just said two great concepts.
Drama
Right,
triangle.
the drama
Dan, I
triangle and
do
above the
you.
line and below the line,
I
and
know.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, to me, moving as a segue to there from the shadow is, the podcast with, Chip Conley about
Yeah.
midlife, and I love the concept of going from the ego to the soul and from knowledge to wisdom,
Yeah.
because aren't these are different ways of thinking about into getting our shadow out there and moving away from our
Mm.
ego, going towards the wholeness of our essence, or what we might call the soul, and then moving from knowledge, which is information that now is readily available through
Yes.
AI, to wisdom, right? Like,
Wisdom.
so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that wisdom, I mean, it's not in the etymology, but I feel like wisdom is embodied knowledge. Like it's knowledge that's been lived and experienced and can be transmitted in a way that's much more grounded than here's an instruction manual or here
Hmm.
are all the things I know about this thing. And with knowledge and wisdom, and we need this obviously in our cultural moment too, like we need more youth and like the idealism of the ideas, the idealism of constructs and sort of the superstructure of like what's possible and what could we live up to. You need that also grounded into wisdom that's like a little bit more practical, a little more pragmatic, a little bit more experience. And part of that experience is like there is a shadow to every ideal as well.
Hmm.
Um, like which I don't think we ever like to see, but there's an
Right.
impact
Right.
always for every
Right.
action in the world,
Hmm.
whether it's our intent or not. And you don't really understand that, I think, until you get to the wisdom, until you get to elderhood, which I just
Right.
hope to get to someday, you know?
Mhm.
Where you've seen some things and you
Right.
recognize. I think one of the things that's happening right now, particularly because we are spending so much time on our screens, we're living in this 2D certain world. And
Mhm.
part of the second half of life is like, I've actually seen this and I know this is 2D and not 3D and not even 4D. Like so much more shadow and nuance to every situation that
Mhm.
I can hold space for. I don't need the certainty of like, this is how it is.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, obviously, we're missing that big
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
Um, and
Well, it takes
I
time. All this takes time. First of all, you have to live long enough to be able to have the experiences.
Mhm.
And then you have to be aware and insightful and reflective and open to use those experiences to see things differently.
Yeah,
And and that's also I'm finding this parallel with these concepts between moving from knowledge to wisdom and from ego to soul. It's like if we can get to soul and to wisdom, it means that we still always have our ego, this self that is, this is who I am, this is my name, this is what I do, this is mine, this is yours. I want that, back to envy. Like, why should you have that and I don't have that? And what does this say about me? And what is my level of achievement? Like all of that ego stuff. When we get to soul, it kind of goes like this deeper sort of what really matters. Like, where can I calibrate? Um, what kind of presence can I have? What kind of energy and light can I bring? Um, what am I here for? Like
yeah,
it just changes, but it comes with age, right? Like you're saying, it comes with age.
yeah. And like, I feel like the ego gets such a bad rap and it gets beaten up in culture, and people are like, kill the ego, or I have no ego, which is insane.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, who are you?
And I think what happens too, like with that aging process, is that the ego becomes, if you allow it, and some people can't, but if you can get a little bit less rigid, if you can start to question, and that's really actually, to be honest, like the heart of this, of choosing wholeness, is when you start to actually question and interrogate the stories that
Mhm.
structure your ego and are holding up your personality. I'm Elise. I'm hyper productive. I'm Elise. I'm the only one who can do things right, so I should do them all. On and on. All my stories, those are all ego creators and protectors,
Mhm.
and they're helpful. It's like, this is how you create a container of self
Mhm.
and how you get through life, right? In an
Mhm.
effective and productive way. And then you get to a point, I think, in midlife where it like stops being so helpful and it needs to relax and soften.
Right.
And you need to put down the stories that no longer serve. And you need to let yourself come into some new iteration. And I don't know. I think one of the most interesting questions, I'm curious actually, Dan, for your thoughts. Like, how do you distinguish between the self and the ego?
The self and the ego. Yeah, that's actually really interesting because a lot of the definitions in my experience combine them. Like the
Yeah.
ego, the self is the ego and the ego is the self. And then as I've evolved in my thinking and in my years in life, I find that the self is almost the human form of the soul.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, like it to me, and I don't know if this is, I'm interested in what you think. I feel like the self is might be somewhere between the ego and the soul, or the mediator, or the connector. How do you see it?
Yeah. I mean, I think of, capital S self as this like higher self that's,
Higher self, yes.
yeah, that's sort of like channeled through the ego.
Hmm.
And I think your ego can get bigger and evolve and like become a more robust, weathered container for that, in
Hmm.
part by like all the stuff that we've been talking about, letting yourself recognize like I am this and I am some of that,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
all the self-work that people do in your practice, all
Mm-hmm.
the self-actualization, the self-realization, the integration that they're doing to make sense of the stories that they're telling themselves about who they
Mm-hmm.
are. And then, yeah, I think, is there a difference between self and soul? Probably. Like, I think that there's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we want to get really woo woo, I feel like we're all like part of some constellation above that sort of filters down into these embodied versions
Mm-hmm.
of ourselves through many
Mm-hmm.
lifetimes, and that there is some like larger Dan Elise,
Right.
but
Right. Right.
wouldn't have that name. And you were probably Danica. Just kidding. But like,
Hey, that feels comfortable. Yeah.
um,
Well, you're now getting into, so I like the higher self. So now you've triggered like something else. So if you would have asked me the difference between the higher self and the ego, I think I immediately tap into this slightly different place. And now you're
yeah,
accessing all this, like this amazing work with your co-author, Phil Stutz. And when we talk about the higher self and really like the universe and the universal forces. See, now this is a whole nother episode. So, but I think where this is relevant to this conversation right now is that higher self. I feel like the higher self almost has a portal to what we call the soul. Like it's like if we can go to our higher self, we have access to this essence, this other
yeah,
knowing, this other intelligence, and where our ego a lot of the times like our ego is just our really human side, like the feet on the ground human part of us. Do you agree
yeah.
with that?
No, I think that's accurate. And I think that part of what, going back to another huge polarity that we're grappling with throughout our lives is this idea of human and divine. And I think part of the process of growing up and living is the integration or the recognition that we are both,
Mm-hmm.
and knitting those two things together, the horizontal and the vertical, right? Like, and I think so many of us too, you see this, I mean, you'd see this criticism of a lot of people on Instagram, right? And how do you bring those two together? How do you spill the vertical into the horizontal? How do you show up in your life as close to your highest self as possible? How do you live your values
Right,
and not treat them as sort of a Sunday punch card,
right,
but,
right,
as actual identity factors, you know?
right. And that's other concept you just reminded me of. In the schools of psychology, and probably Freudian, neo-Freudian in a sense, is that how do we merge our real self with our ideal self? Like right,
Mm,
right, that aspirational self of who we want to be, who we want to become, which I also was probably maybe our higher self, and then our real self, which is very ego based, feet on the ground, human, and we want to keep evolving towards this. When I say idealized self, I'm not talking for everyone perfectionism. We're not like that's a whole nother thing. We're talking about this like idealized form of who we want to be as individuals on this earth during this lifetime. Like get as far as we can in our own personal evolution and really be thinking about that. And I know, well, Elise, like if I think we share that we probably think about it even more than we should be so we can actually like get on with doing it instead of just thinking about it. That's like one of
I
my
don't know what you're
dilemmas.
talking
Yeah, I
about.
know. Sorry. I didn't mean to project that onto you.
Phil, edit this
Yeah,
part out.
yeah. Oh, the whole becoming maybe we're like the whole idea of becoming, right? And okay, so this is into your workbook, right? So, I mean, because the workbook, which I feel that minimizes it. Like
I know,
it
it's
is like
really a book.
it's
I
a
just
book,
read the
right?
audiobook
Yeah,
for it. It's a book.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
book. So guys, this is an active, interactive book choosing wholeness over goodness, which starts with Carl Jung's statement, "I'd rather be whole than good." And so this is really what you and Courtney collaborated to do to provide a roadmap to help people continue to evolve into wholeness.
Yeah. That's the plan, you
Yeah.
know? Well,
Yeah.
yeah, after I wrote On Our Best Behavior and would go out and, talk to mostly women about it, they were like, "It's great. Now I see everything. I see it. I see the matrix. I understand how I have been programmed and what I've
Mm-hmm.
subscribed to and all these stories that I've taken on that are not my own. So now what?"
Right.
And
Right.
I am not a therapist like you. I'm not a coach. And I didn't really have an answer except, well, I think consciousness is like the most important step. I still feel that way. But my friend Courtney, and this is really fun because I think any co-creative event, and I think we're always co-creating if we allow it to happen, but is a coach. And she was like, I know our worlds fit together sort of in this perfect yin yang way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and where there's a big overlap of interest, but she is like a tool queen. Like she is a process master. She knows how to take people through an experience in a way that I know how to create the context and give the information.
Mm-hmm.
And we did this retreat together in North Carolina, and she showed up with this process, which became the heart of this book, where we had it was about 50 women, and the process was to identify according to the sins, but it works with anything, and you don't have to work in that framework, but to identify the stories that are most alive in you. And there's a whole process for doing this because most of us wouldn't be able to just come up with them on our own. You start with the fact and you start generating the stories that you have about that fact. And you come up with these stories, which have essentially you've built your whole personality around them. One of my stories that I outline in the book for sloth is I'm the only one who can do things right, so I should do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I have spent a lot of energy throughout my life. I can thank that story for getting me really far. It's been very productive story for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
also cost me a lot. And in doing this 7-step process, you make these stories really big and you get really clear about what you get from them, the payoff of these stories, the costs of these stories, the fear that's keeping the story alive. And it starts to become ever more clear to you how you have structured your life to ensure that this story stays true.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to use an easy example of I'm the only one who can do things right, so I should do them all, I spend my life looking for proof that I'm the only one who can do things right, right? I refuse to delegate. I don't accept support. I set up my partnership so that if I respond the fastest, I can make sure that I'm the only one who knows the logins. I'm the only one who knows the context. I'm the only one who knows the process and the protocols. And therefore, it always comes back to me. So I can be reaffirmed, Dan, in this story that I have, that I definitely am the only one who can do it right.
Right.
And so it's a process, I think, and having done this with women where you're like, "Holy shit, look
Mm-hmm.
at what I am up to."
Right.
You just
Right.
expose yourself to yourself, and then you have a choice. You can either continue with the story and make it conscious,
Right.
where you're like, "I see what I'm up to," or you can say, "All right, thank you, story." You can Marie Kondo it, like, "Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you, socks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's time to say goodbye. I'm gonna choose something different." I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna choose a different story and be less attached, less rigid about this story.
Mm-hmm. There's so many ways I want to go here. Well, let's just take it through in the process as I read the workbook. And we were talking earlier about the drama triangle and then above the line and below the line. Like there's so many, it really is. It takes people through to demystify and deconstruct how the cultural programming has helped us come up with our own stories, which we then narrate
Mhm.
constantly, and the tools from the drama triangle, from let's see about can we get above the line versus below the line, and then of course bringing in the personas of from IFS work, internal family systems, and all the
Yeah.
parts of us. So there's so much really effective concepts and tools that you guys weave together to bring people through. in the context, the cultural programming of the sins. And I know, like you said, you
Yeah.
could do this beyond that, but it's really nice how the I was the 7 deadly sins plus sadness, the 8 sins,
Yes.
they mirror the book, and it really is a guide. I like
Yeah.
a guidebook more than workbook. I'm just like
Guidebook.
it sounds
Yeah.
it's a guide to take people through. And I'm wondering, how have you changed from going through this? Like, what have been
Mm, yeah.
your wisdom changes as as you've gone through this?
I mean, it's so interesting to think about because I met Courtney. One of the first times I met her was at a book party for On Our Best Behavior right before it came out.
Hmm.
And she has given me, like, as you mentioned, above and below the line and drama triangle and all these tools that have really sort of sped or supercharged some of my work in the last couple of years in terms of giving me frameworks and ways to understand the underlying dynamics. And so that alone has changed me, but then also just this very simple idea that we tell ourselves stories. We're meaning making machines. Our ability to create through words is exceptional. Everything is a story almost. Very few things are facts. Facts can be documented on a video recorder, but everything else is a story, right?
Hmm.
Culture is a story, country is a story, religion is a story, just not a fact. And that's okay. Again, like this is where we derive all of our meaning. But I think what I have really come to understand is when I am in a story and I am trying really hard to make that story a fact and that it is incontrovertible, indisputable, it is just how it is
Hmm.
reality, etc. And to just even have that simple, is it a fact or is it a story? And to be like, it's a story and I can choose something else
Hmm.
instead.
Hmm.
Or I can say, we're recording this at a really sad moment in the culture right after a devastating event in Texas, right? And I'm a
Yes.
mom and you're a dad, and
Hmm.
my oldest is going to sleepaway camp next week, and I was already totally strung out about it.
Right.
And I have a lot of stories, right? And And in this process from doing this work, I can also be like, all right, Elise, I understand all the catastrophic stories that you have where Max is going to fall off a cliff or drown in the ocean or whatever it is, like these cataclysmic events.
Hmm.
Can you generate some other stories? Like he makes a new lifelong best friend.
Right.
He learns how to get dressed without interference from me in the morning, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I hope
so
so. I hope he's
I
able to do
hope
that at camp. That'll be awkward, right? Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
having that
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
with him as it was
Yeah.
taking him
Yeah.
5 minutes to get his socks on the other day. I was like, "This isn't gonna fly at camp, babe." Um, but yeah, just pushing myself to be like, "All right, you can take those because I have a negativity
Mhm.
bias, like, hold those stories, but you then have to hold others as well."
Yeah. Yeah. The final exercise where people explore their relationship with the sins, just to bring it full circle. What it made me also think about, and we haven't talked about yet this show, was the Enneagram, which
Yes.
we talked about last time. You talk about a lot. Courtney does, as an expert in it. Um, and in the Enneagram, the goal is like your type, right, stays the same, but you're changing your relationship to your type with more awareness. And this is a similar process that you're taking people through with understanding their relationship to the sins so they can have more awareness and see where they want to move with this awareness.
Yeah. 100%. It's like, yes, just yeah, recognize the tendency and then you can change how you relate to it and
Hmm.
change how you feel about it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
As we wind down, wondering about how when I'm now thinking about the Enneagram and now thinking about this work in the
Yeah.
guidebook,
Yeah.
choosing goodness over wholeness, do you think we stay who we are, but we develop different relationship with our parts and our instincts and our motivations?
Yes, I do. I think that we are sort of arrive wholly baked in some ways, and then the process of life is about realizing that wholeness and doing it. I think we come in and we're not conscious, right? We're like unconscious toddlers, and then our job throughout life is to become ever more conscious, and part of that is like eating the shadow, right? But and then we come back. I think we come back into this full experience of ourselves, but we're now above the line. We're now conscious about who we are.
Hmm.
We see who we are. We understand who we are in relation to other people. It goes to that Robert Bly quote that you spend the first half of your life putting things in the bag, and then the second
Right.
half of your life taking them out. Right?
Hmm.
It
Right.
is this full circle experience if we really commit to doing it. And it goes to the Chip Conley, it goes to any conversation about midlife too. It's like recognizing at that halfway point, has this tower I've been building, this ladder that's against the wall, is it against the right wall? Or for a lot of people, it's that moment where they're like, I've built all the artifice, all the structure, the ego, the trappings of this life, and now I got to go out and find the meaning.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I wrote down the quote that you wrote in the guidebook, Robert Johnson, who's a Jungian
Oh, yeah.
therapist, about the question of wholeness and the shadow. And here it is. Generally, the first half of life is devoted to the cultural process, gaining one's skills, raising a family, disciplining oneself in 100 different ways. The second half of life is devoted to restoring the wholeness or making holy of life.
Mm, there you go. He said it way better. But yes, that is it. That's what
Hmm.
we're doing here.
That's what we're doing. And everyone, this guidebook is going to help you on your journey.
I really
um,
like guidebook.
yeah,
Much better. Too
yeah.
late for the cover, but
I just point. I just yeah. We can. It's a well. Okay. It's just it's solid. It's a book, everyone. Like it is. It is a full book. And when I opened the PDF, I was expecting I was expecting like a thinner workbook, and I opened it. I don't. I was like, whoa! It's another 300 and something pages. Like there
I
is a
know.
lot of content there, everyone. So it is Elise opening it up with a like updated summary and personal sharing of whichever sin we are on, and then it's Courtney coming in with the tools related to that sin to help people work through in a very systematic way through every sin, and then bringing it all together at the end with these some of the tools that we mentioned and way more in there. So go check it out, and so at least tell everyone. And you have at the same time as this is coming out, which is going to be at the time that we release this, is also your on our best behaviors coming out in paperback, which is a big
Yes.
milestone as well.
Yeah. So choosing wholeness over goodness and on our best behavior and paperback are coming out at the end of August. And then my
Say it all.
podcast.
Say it all.
Okay.
Yeah. Say
Say
it
it all.
all.
My
Yeah.
podcast is Pulling the Thread.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
thank you, which is also the name of my Substack, which you can find at eliseloehnen.substack.com. And I am on Instagram at eliseloehnen.com, but I would much rather hang out with you on Substack or really on Pulling the Thread.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They're all good. They're all good.
Thank you.
And also, I haven't yet read your new book, my with Phil Stutz. My wife just ordered it, and I just think
Yeah.
that
Let
is
me know what you
so
think.
awesome, that collaboration.
It was really fun. It was
He
such an
is a
honor to work
legend.
with
He
him.
is
Yeah.
so amazing.
Yeah. That's
And
true and false magic. That's what that's
yes,
called. It is also officially called a workbook, but there is not one single worksheet in it. So it's a book. It's a
it's
book.
a book. It's a book.
They
It's a
just
book.
really wanted a tools workbook. And
Yes.
so they were like, we will make this a tools workbook. It doesn't matter that it's not.
Right. And the tools, everyone, Phil Stutz, the tools. I mean, that's an amazing book. And since we're giving Phil, it's not even Phil, because Phil would not want us talking about him. It's the work. And so the documentary Stutz is just for anyone who's looking to grow and expand and engage in our higher self and the wonders of the universe. This is all such good stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, so Elise, since I am going to remain heavy on the male podcast invite you list, I am going to look forward to talking about this next book that you're working
Yes,
on.
I'm coming
And
back.
I'm going to love to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil.
I so enjoyed my conversation with Elise. She has a way of building context, breaking it down, and distilling the essential facts and truths about the unwritten stories that shape all of our lives and that we live by, often without even knowing it. Here are 5 key takeaways from this meaningful conversation. Number 1, the shadow holds the gold. As Carl Jung taught, and Elise reinforces, our unconscious, rejected parts aren't flaws to fix, but sources of power, growth, and wholeness waiting to be reclaimed. Number 2, we all carry a story bag. Elise and Courtney Smith's new guidebook helps us unpack the rigid stories we live by, often unconsciously, and gives us tools to rewrite them with intention. Number 3, stories shape our reality, but we can rewrite them. We all live by internalized stories, often inherited from our culture, family, or early experiences. Elise's guidebook offers a practical path to identify these subconscious scripts, understand their emotional payoffs and costs, and consciously choose new narratives rooted in truth, not fear. Number 4, the journey from ego to soul. Midlife often calls us to move beyond success and identity into essence and meaning. It's a shift from knowledge to wisdom, from performing life to living it. And number 5, fear is a universal driver. When we can identify fear, both in ourselves and others, we unlock empathy. Especially in today's polarized world, understanding that fear often masks itself as outrage or certainty can help us reconnect across divides. Take all of this in, everyone. Lots and lots for us to ponder on, for us to uncover, for us to look for our shadow, bring it into the light. Let's embrace it all as individual humans and as a collective. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of our amazing community, for your 5-star reviews, and for subscribing. It really does make a difference. Let's do our best to be our best and go forth with courage and openness. And as always, remember, we have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.